So a lot of people have been starting to use HTSL since its full release, and that's really cool. As the developer, it makes me very happy to see people enjoy my work, though most of you just like the export feature, don't you? Regardless, just because people are using it doesn't mean they use it to its fullest abilities. I spent a lot of my time working on some of these features I don't see people use that much, so I figured I would make this video, a comprehensive guide on HTSL's advanced syntax features. First off, this is an advanced HTSL guide. If you don't know the general ideas of HTSL, or even have it installed, I highly recommend Alex's video as a good introductory video to HTSL. It's in the description and probably the pinned comment too. I'll also put any updates or corrections to the video there. Also, shout out to Sin Under, Sign Under? I don't know, I'm just gonna go with Under, who spent a significant amount of time translating my bad code into Java so that you can use HTSL in the Essentials mod, along with a bunch of other cool features. Lastly, if you have any problems, you can ask in the comments, a housing-related Discord server, or even the Hypixel forums, and someone might be able to help. However, if you do find a bug with HTSL, it's best that you report it in my Discord server, as anywhere else I might forget to patch it. Link it in the description. So first off, I'm going to clear my name. I don't normally use VS Code this zoomed in. I just know people will complain if it's at the normal zoom. Here's a pretty simple KDR calculator function. It's pretty standard, but there might be a better way, even with more decimals. And I'm not really going to explain all of this, how it works. You can just pause the video and try to figure it out yourself. But since this isn't a basics guide and it's just showing you some of the syntax features that you can use, I won't be explaining any of the logic behind this stuff. So this is, it's okay. It might take a few seconds to look at this. So you see all these stat placeholders, and that's pretty necessary. But it looks kind of bad, especially since the syntax highlighting doesn't do anything about that. Sorry. But we can actually make this look a lot better. So in HTSL, there's this thing that I like to call placeholder shortcuts, where we can simply just put stat kills. Boom. And then the compiler will read this the exact same as it'll read this, so that these will compile to the same things and run the exact same. And you can do this with any other stat. You can view all of the placeholder shortcuts on the forums guide that I made. Anyways, it's really just to get the code looking a lot cleaner, and so I already went ahead and did that. So, as you can see, this is a lot better. It's nicer on the eyes, and it's easy to look at, and maybe even more intuitive. Just know that if you're using placeholder shortcuts, it won't work in strings. So here, it still needs to be the regular placeholder. Now this is pretty cool, it's a simple way to make your code look a lot better, but we can do even more. You'll notice that we use the words stat KDR a lot, and sometimes that can just get really repetitive. So what I did is I made a feature called just shortcuts, unlike placeholder shortcuts. Okay, don't judge my naming system. And it allows us to get rid of a lot of this. So all you have to do is go up above wherever you would use it, and then just type define, and then whatever keyword you want it to be, so KDR, and then what its value is. So we're going to say stat KDR. What'll happen is every time the compiler sees this, it'll replace it with this. Now it's important the stat name here is in quotes, but that's only because it has the same name as the shortcut. So be careful that you don't put the name of the shortcut in the value of the shortcut, or else it's going to get stuck in a loop. So now, because we've done this, all we need is just this, and that'll still compile the same. Now, like earlier, I went ahead and did this. Unfortunately, the syntax highlighting isn't able to handle this. I haven't been able to figure that out, sorry, but in general, this is just easier to type because it's a lot shorter, and maybe even more readable. But that's not the main use of shortcuts. Shortcuts can be really good at getting rid of what's called a magic number. So here I have this. Now, you can pause, you can try to figure this out, but quick quiz, what does the 47 number here mean? Why is it there? Well, if you don't know, the player.protocol is something that the server uses to identify a player's version. And 47 is the specific number for 1.8.9. So what this code is saying is if they're playing 1.8.9, set a stat good version to 1 and else set it to 0. This could be so that like maybe some accessibility is turned on because they're on a newer version, which might be buggier, whatever. It's just the first example I could think of. But anyways, if you were a mega nerd and you didn't feel like Googling it, you'd probably have no clue why this number is 47. And this is what's called a magic number in programming. Magic numbers are numbers that have no self-apparent meaning, which means if you look at the code, you can see the numbers there, but you're not sure why it's there or why it's that specific number. This is in general a pretty bad practice because when you're working with others, or maybe even you take a break from your own code for a while and then come back, you'll look at this number and you might just completely forget why it's there. So what we can use is a shortcut to name this number without actually changing it. So here I've done that, and now, it makes perfect sense. 47 is the protocol number for 1.8.9, so if we set a shortcut ideal version to 47, all we have to do is check if it's equal to ideal version. But you might be saying magic numbers don't seem that bad. Well, there's an even worse fact about them other than being unreadable. If you have a lot of that one specific magic number. So if for some reason I felt the need to do this check multiple times, I don't know why I would check the protocol multiple times, but if I needed to, and I wanted to check 47 a lot of times, then, well, let's say I wanted to change the number. Well, there we go. I changed it, and now all of these are changed. But when you're dealing with magic numbers, that's not going to be the case. You're going to have to go through the code and change every single instance of that number. So by using magic numbers, you not only make it unreadable, but you also make it harder to change later in the future. And even if you do change it later in the future, you might miss one or two instances of it, which means you could get buggy code and have no clue why, because you thought you changed it correctly when you didn't. And that's why you want to use things like shortcuts to name the number and even just define it ahead of time so that you don't have to enter in that number multiple times. Here I've made a function which gets a specific digit out of a number. Again, you can pause and you can figure out how it works, but I've used what's called an expression, and I'll explain that in a moment. So let's say I want to get the third digit. Well, then I'm going to have to divide by 10 to the third power. Now, expressions are pretty good because they allow us to do math in HTSL. So all you have to do is put brackets like so, and then put whatever math you need, and then it'll calculate that and then put it into housing. So this would read as 10 to the third, which is 1,000. So that's pretty useful, and especially with magic numbers. Let's say if I wanted to get the fourth digit instead, well, then I could change it to that. But if someone else were trying to make the change, well, they might just change it to 4 and have no clue that they have to change the rest of it. So for example, if this was 4, then it would need to be 10,000, not 1,000, which means that while also changing it to 4, they need to change this to 10,000. So for this, expressions are actually really useful. They allow us to do the math with the magic number as well as keeping it readable. And yeah, I'll just quickly note that this is how you notate exponentiation. It's not caret, which is something called an XOR bit shift or whatever, which if you don't know what that is, you probably don't need it. So now here we're gonna get back to the shortcuts. This just makes it easier. So if I shared this code, someone could very easily say, well, I need the second digit. So I'm gonna change this to 2, and that's all they need to worry about. Makes it easy for you or someone else to change it to a different number without needing to look through all the code. Now I want to show you an actual real-world example of how this was used. Now here in Bridgewater's, a house by me and my friend, we needed to make this a GUI shop where we could buy cosmetics. Now it's not actually that bad to code a cosmetic shop like this, but because of how we wanted to make it easily expandable, we had to be very careful. It also needs to know when to purchase or equip it, or, just fail to purchase it because they don't have enough tokens. It's pretty robust, but the problem is that we needed to do this with so many potential items. So we needed to make a really expandable way to do it and handle all of them, as well as making it easy to import all of the slots in the GUI. So back in here, you can see that we use shortcuts to label ID, cosmetic type, cosmetic full type, price, and name, so that we could successfully change all of these stat names up here without needing to actually worry about changing all of them correctly. This makes it easy to import all the necessary cosmetics, as all we would have to do is change the ID, which is 1 to whatever number for each cosmetic type. And then like if we wanted blocks, then we could do B and blocks. And if we wanted to change the price, we could do that and the name. So we'd change that as necessary for every single cosmetic type and then just import it, and it would work just as we wanted it to. You might know that we do use a lot of these expressions to add in the name and parts of the stat names, and this is what expressions and shortcuts can be especially good for, is making it really easy to change out all of these required configurations. But there's another reason that you might want to use expressions. So there's one more thing that I want to show you guys that HTSL can do. So this is a pretty simple example function for calculating the max HP for like an RPG or something. It's pretty simple. All you have to do is set the base health and then add on any like additions from any armor piece by just checking if they have it. And, it's relatively simple, but, and, obviously you might want to name it slightly better than this, since armor 0, armor 1, and armor 2 are pretty arbitrary. But the reason I named it these is because I was lazy and it's easier to translate this into a loop, which is the last thing I'm going to be showing you. For those of you who don't have experience with real-world programming, loops are essentially just telling the computer to do a few lines of code over and over until it's met the correct conditions. Luckily, HTSL's syntax for loops is actually relatively simple. All we need to do is do loop, and then we're going to enter in the amount of times that we want it to loop. So since we have 3 things here, we're going to say 3. Now we're going to name a shortcut that will only apply to what's in the loop, which means we can only use that shortcut in this loop. I like to name mine index. Normally in programming it might be like I, but index is a little more clear, and I feel like that suits HTSL better, which is why I use that. And now, once you've done that, all you have to do is put some brackets and enter them. And there we go. We have made a loop. Anything in here will loop 3 times. Okay, but how do we use this? Well, it's pretty simple. Let's put it in here. And then all we need to do is change this into an expression. Then have it add index. And there we go. Now it'll do that for each armor piece. Now first off, I'll say that index is going to be 0 index, which means that the first time we loop through, even though it's 3 times, index will be equal to 0. And then the second time through, it'll be equal to 1, and then the third time through, it'll be equal to 2. But if you'd rather read it as armor 1, armor 2, armor 3, then all you have to do is just put index in some parentheses and add 1. And there you go. Now you may spot a potential problem. This number changes between the armor pieces, but the loop will just do 10 over and over. Now you may realize that you're able to use some pretty simple math to make it these values, but what if I wanted it to be that? This would be a lot harder to do with simple math, but we don't need simple math because we can do better than that. Expressions can support arrays. For those of you who don't know what an array is, they're basically a variable that can store multiple values. But in the context of expressions, they allow us to make it easy to use the index. So all we have to do is put our list of values, so 10, 20, 30, and then we'll add another set of brackets to denote which one of these we want to use, and we'll have it match up with index. And there we go. This will now loop through. Index will be 0, so it'll read as index plus 1, so armor underscore 1, and then increment it. Index is 1, and it'll grab this number. This is the exact same as over here. Except for, I guess, this, because I changed it to index plus 1, but again, that only takes that amount of work. That's it for the guide. You now know pretty much all of the useful HTSL features that you probably didn't know already. Of course, I'm always open to suggestions, which you can put pretty much anywhere that I might see, and I might write it down. I'm constantly trying to look for ways to improve it, as I do want it to be a very useful tool that many people can use effectively. So that's it. If you have any suggestions for any other video ideas that I could do to help provide insight into some more features and things that you might not know about, let me know. See ya.